it's educational. Because everybody always says that everybody's got a great story in them. So what I thought would be a really good thing this time is to invite a couple of storytellers up on stage to tell us the ins and outs of how it actually works. Does that sound interesting? Now, do we have any fans of Transformers in the room?
Yay!
There's actually less people who are fans of Transformers than writers. That's interesting. Come on, I know we're getting on in the day, but do we have fans of Transformers in the room? That's a little bit better. Okay, so these two individuals have worked on Transformers, multiple Transformers shows for multiple years, and are still working on Transformers shows. That's quite interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Nicole Beck and Brian Holfeld. Hello, come on, take a seat. Oh, are we having fun? Yeah? Okay, good, that's it. Always a good start. Right, so as I said, one of the things that we were thinking about doing was talking about writing for animation, and I've just realised that in a terrible, unprofessional move, I've come up here without my clicker. Oh dear.
Is there a clicker in the house?
Look at this. The last time we had a gentleman on stage for glasses, now we have a clicker. So we can start. Thank you very much. Round of applause for the clicker. Now, this is going to be really difficult for you perhaps to see, but we can see it down here, so you don't need to strain your neck. But we've got a load of documents. Now, before we start, let's take a step back here in regards to the script writing process. How, you're part of a show, you're working on it, how do you, first of all, pitch the idea for the show?
I'm not just who is on. Nice. Well, a lot of times a studio will come to you and say, hey, we want to do another version of Transformers. What ideas do you have? There's that version, and they bring in a ton of writers in the room, and everyone throws out ideas, and then you write up some material for them, usually like a pitch, like a 1 to 2 page pitch.
Are you talking about not just for an episode, but for a show?
Yeah, I'm talking about show first. I'm going with that.
And
or sometimes they'll say, we'd like to do this specific show. Like when we were on Rescue Bots, they said, we'd like to do kind of a preschool bridge show. Bridge is kind of that term for in between preschool and 6 to 11. We'd like to do this kind of different version of the show, different from Prime, and here are the toys, go. So sometimes you get a prompt, like a toy, although they were actually still in just model form, so they were just big blocks of plastic that were single colors at the time, which was pretty cool. And then sometimes you'll have your own idea that you come to a studio with, and that one's a hard one. It's a long process, usually like 3-4 years of development, and you give them your idea, and when they finally like that idea, they give you the go-ahead to write an outline, and then eventually a Bible and a script, and then they'll say, yeah, but maybe instead of it being a Martian cat, it could be a kid who lives in leaves. And then you go back to square one and you do it all over again. So that's kind of how that process works.
And we're going to cover some of this material in the dedicated Rescue Bots panel, but in this case, what prompted it was a line of toys for preschoolers. They had done their research and found that preschoolers had trouble turning the toys, transforming them, and this was the one button thing. And so they wanted the show to back that. So they presented us with the 4 main characters, the Rescue Bots, they had the same names, right? Blaze was with a Z.
The Z.
I
You'll
think
see it actually
in this document, I think, yeah.
But everyone else we made up for them. I think they had human kind of partners with them, but we changed the personalities, and I think we only retained a couple of names.
Cody was the only name.
Cody
was actually named already.
Charlie, maybe?
Charlie Burns, yeah, there wasn't.
He was Franklin for a while. Anyway, we're getting too deep into Rescue Bots at this point.
So, just in case somebody doesn't know the terminologies that we're throwing around, what is a Bible? Because we always hear about show Bibles.
Sure. Yeah, the Bible is essentially the document for the show. So if you're a freelance writer that's going to come work for me, I'm going to slide the Bible across the table to you, and it's about 25 to 30 pages, I would say. Sometimes you get a mini Bible on a show, and that's closer to 8 to 10. But basically it's going to outline all the characters in the show. It's going to have the premise of the show, the tone of the show, some of the locations that you might see within, the pilot episode and future episodes. Want to
No, I'm just Bible because sometimes what usually happens is you will write that Bible before the show is picked up in order to sell the show. So it's a document that has several different purposes. It's a sales document, it's also a creative document, and it's also kind of just a guideline, a blueprint for every episode is going to be. But then by the end of the first season, usually you've gone way beyond that Bible and changed so many things that you end up writing a new version of the Bible for the second season, which I think we did for Rescue Bots.
We definitely updated it.
We definitely updated it.
And you'll have story ideas in that first original Bible, again, as a sales document. So, both like just some one-line premise ideas and then full-page premises like this will sometimes be in that Bible. And it's really helpful if you also have here's what you'll see in every episode. Because it really helps you as a writer knowing, as you're going and staring at that blank page, what am I trying to accomplish? And I think...
Yeah. So let's get down to the premise.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Let's get to specifics.
Okay.
So this is a premise for...
It was the final title of the episode was Flopsters. Was it Flopsters on Parade? I think it was just Flopsters. This was the fourth episode of the first season, and we were trying very hard to find stories built around the location of Maine, the island of Griffin Rock Island off the coast of Maine. So we were using anything Maine we could get. And our executive producer, Jeff Klein, who is the founder of the Feast, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for him, lives in Maine and lives in Portland, Maine. So he wanted it set at his home state. So the big breakthrough, I think, when we were developing the show was the idea to have it be a tech-savvy island, an island devoted, kind of like Eureka. We kind of stole it from Eureka. Barney. An homage. It was an homage. And so the Tech Gone Wrong was basically the premise for our whole series. It kind of served as a great jumping off point for stories. Again, we'll get into this in the Rescue Bots panel, sure, but as you probably know, if you're a fan of the show and not a fan of the show, you probably know there are no Decepticons in our show, which kind of opened up for us a lot of storytelling. We kind of took that as a challenge to find new ways to tell Rescue Bots stories. So anyway, this was the fourth episode. Originally it was going to be called, this was Lobsters on Parade originally. It was going to be Giant Lobsters. And then...
that's when notes come in.
And that's when the notes come in. And I think it was Jeff, who pointed out that it was harder to make them, the scale was harder to do, making them big and little, to make them shrink and grow with 2D. So we decided to just replicate a lot of them. Instead of having like one or two giant lobsters, we had dozens of regular lobsters just floating in the air, which is a lot easier to animate because they're not really floating. I don't want to spoil anything, but they're just kind of dropping there.
I'm going to take a sidebar real fast here too, because this is kind of the thing that you might not necessarily think about when you're writing, you're sitting down, you're writing what you want to write. We get all these notes from many different sources, and sometimes they're producibility notes. Like Brian was saying, it's a lot harder to show something kind of growing on screen than it is to use something like, what is it called? It's not called herd, but there's a particle kind of programming that you can do to make a lot of objects move together as a swarm. There we go, as a swarm. So we could do that with these lobsters much more cheaply than, say, have this giant lobster. And so sometimes those things inform story, and you can either be upset about it, or you can embrace it and say, okay, this might make it weirder, or how can I make it better because of this? So that's just one of those kind of random.
In fact, they were not going to be giant, they were going to be glowing, which I think is where the lobsters.
Oh, I thought it was giant lobsters.
I think it was giant glowing lobsters.
We have different memories.
But yeah, but it was kind of a very important episode because it was the fourth episode in, and after we set up the world and the whole thing, the first two episodes, this kind of set the template for the tone of the rest of the show to follow. It was comedy, it was action, it was silly, but it was...
A lot of movie references.
A lot of what?
Movie references.
A lot of movie references. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen, for those who've seen Flopsters, there's homages to birds and the birds and lots of other... in fact, I was just looking, as I was preparing for this, I found there were some notes. Oh, we don't think the telephone booth rescue scene was so random. Can we change it to something else? Why is it here? It's like, well, we had to explain.
We had to explain kindly and not make people feel stupid.
Oh, you remember? Yeah.
So this is a pitch document.
This is the premise. This is the first thing we submit in writing to the powers that be. The producers see it, and we do it internally. Then it's sent to the studio. In this case, not only Hasbro Studio, but also the Hub Network.
And standards and practices, but we'll get to that.
For the Discovery, I don't know if you remember, but just for Prime and Rescue Bots, just the Discovery Channel and Hasbro partnered to found the Hub, a short-lived
In the US.
network in the US, which was formerly Discovery Family Channel and now became the Hub and is now just Discovery again, I think, right? But and again, we'll talk about this at the other panel, but because it was a brand new network and a brand new startup business for Hasbro, their studio end of it, as opposed to the toy, which we should probably talk about at some point in the rest of us too. But because of that, what was the point I was going to
I don't know. Basically, Brian's saying, come to the Rescue Bots panel too, okay, guys?
Yeah, come on. No, what I think it was, my point.
And we'll get back to it.
So, pitch document gets sent off. Usually about a page long.
Yeah.
They try to keep premises a page long.
Yeah. So basically you need to be able to know your idea, synthesize it down and put it into 3 paragraphs as you've got here. And then that goes through a whole load of people and eventually
Ooh, and here we have the
Outline, first draft.
you come to this. So what is the difference between what we've seen and what we're seeing?
The name has changed, as you notice.
Yeah.
It's now Flopsters. It's laid out differently. The outline is just laid out in a different format. And after 35 years in this business, writing outlines is a totally different skill from writing scripts. Totally different. All writing is writing, I believe. But sometimes you have someone who writes a great outline, and you think, oh, you're very excited about hiring this writer, and then their script just kind of doesn't live up to the outline. And vice versa. Sometimes the outline is not as good. So it's a different skill set, so you have to be ready for it, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, this is almost more like reading a story, right? It's going to get turned into script format. But we're trying to put all of the information here. And for me, when I write an outline, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to set up each progression of logic and movement. Because eventually, in the next thing you'll see, we have to set up the camera angles and know where we're going to stage things. And so a lot of times we'll do something that's called a slug line outline, and I guess this isn't one of those.
I think it might be.
You call it that.
It's not slug lines, but we do it in the locations.
Yeah, so you got the location up there, so that'll help when you get to script. You know, Town Square Night, okay, that's where it's going to be. This also helps our production team, because they say, oh my God, how many locations do you have in this? Cut that, please. And then we've done in caps lock all of the characters to kind of help, or massive props that need to be designed. So again, that's for production.
This is when Frankie was still Joe.
Yeah, so Francine Green was Joe here before we got clearance on the name. So get to see that too. But yeah, so again, this is more like storytelling, and then later on it's going to be in the script
This is probably, what, about 6 to 8 pages?
Oh God, we got up to 12 pages, I want to say.
For 22?
Yeah,
Wow.
lots of details.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and it's tough too, because sometimes you want to call out enough detail that the executives get the story and know what it's about, but you don't want to get so bogged down in detail that it's a script. So it's not completely finished yet. You want to save some surprises, you want to save some material.
Oh yeah, and then sometimes if you put jokes, it's always good to put a little bit of dialogue in an outline, because it gives you the flavor of the characters, the voice of the characters, it's fun to read. But if you put too much in there, then it slows it down. Or if the executives read your joke already, they won't think it's funny when they read it in the draft. Be like, oh, this joke isn't playing, but you laughed before. Well, yeah, because I heard it now. So it's kind of a balance.
They don't understand that the people watching the show will be hearing the joke for the first time. Well, we've heard it 3 times, it's not funny.
So a question for you then, you're talking about Town Square Night, you're talking about sets, things like that. How conscious do you need to be as a writer, even at this early stage, about budget?
Oh yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, always.
Because we shouldn't have to, but we have to.
Yeah, and this is actually kind of one of the first checkpoints. A lot of times we'll get notes at premise from our animation studio like, hey, so when you mentioned the running of the bulls of Pamplona, how many bulls are we talking? And then we get this chance to go to outline, and that's when they really see it up and on its feet and what we're intending. And so this is generally when we'll get those scope notes of like, yeah, don't think we can do that. Does it have to be, an underwater sequence? Things like that.
Is there ever a case when a premise is so good that it beats the budget? Where you've looked at something and you've said, this is as good as the Mona Lisa.
I think that's what happened with this one. That's a great question, because sometimes it's not the quality of the writing as much as sort of the placement of the season. Is this going to be a special episode that we're going to bust our budget for? Is it going to be the 2-parter that either opens or closes the season, or the two-parter in the middle of the season. Those are the things you want to save your big guns for. But I've never had a situation where someone said, "This is so great, here's my checkbook."
There's two corollaries, and there's one if you get a celebrity,
Yes.
right? And then it's like, okay, so we need to give more lines to this character, and because we have a celebrity coming in, and make sure it's a really good story for them. So sometimes that'll be one, and then sometimes they'll get so excited about the toyetic nature of something. So when you're working with a toy company, a lot of times they'll bring you a toy and say, make an episode/season about this. And we've had some of those fun situations. And my favorite will always be when we were asked to design a car transport for the rescue bots to use. And we said, but they can drive themselves, but I guess they want to kick back sometimes, so sure. But anyway, when you're asked to do something with a toy, or if it's going to be featuring something, I've had a 22 turn into a 44-minute special because of that. When it's like, oh, we think this will really help sell toy or sell the show, so let's spend some more money.
I remember, we're getting Rescue Bots territory, but the finale of season 1 introduced that vehicle that we had to design. And it was very important at the end of season 1 because they were going to make it. By the time season 2 started, they'd thrown away that plan. And it was so important, and we made it work. We always kind of found those things as like challenges. It's like, okay, that sounds really stupid, but we're going to make it work.
We'll justify it.
Like the boat, the ship tender, salvage. We introduced in season 3, I think. And then, High Tide was the tender, salvage was the recycling. Yeah. High Tide was, I don't know if you guys remember, the ship tender. We didn't know what a ship tender was when they said, we're going to make a ship tender toy.
Kids
love ship tenders. What are ship tenders? So maybe some of you know, anybody know what a ship tender is? It's a ship that kind of tends to other ships. It's like, it has cranes on it, it's big, and it's kind of cool. But it's gigantic.
Yeah.
So it's far beyond the scale of what a transformer could...
on Rescue Bots.
Unless he's a giant transformer.
And what planet?
So he was kind of a mech, he was kind of a regular transformer instead of a mech boat,
yeah.
kind of thing, yeah. But that's the kind of thing, and they did sell that eventually, I think. But it turned into a great character. Jason Marsden knocked it out of the park, so you never know what's going to happen with these things.
What I was going to say too is that in that case with the mobile transit unit, is that what it's called?
Yes.
Okay. The thing that they made us build, when they decided not to make a toy, we blew it up in the show. So that was also satisfying.
Yeah, because we'd already written the first episode for season 2, and they said, oh, we're not going to do it. They said, well, okay, then we'll just blow it up. We'll never use it again.
Okay, so we've done this then, we've got the teaser. Now, what's the process with this then? This is just going with the same people?
Going with the same people, and standards and practices that we
That's
talked
it.
about.
We can't forget standards and practices.
Oh, and legal, who are going to tell you can't use that name, let's make sure we see helmets and seatbelts, etc.
And sometimes you have to follow what they say, sometimes you push back, and sometimes you... My favorite story of any of these, and this is like the worst SCP I've ever read, I forget who was told the story to Comic-Con. They were working on a Superman ship, and they didn't want to have the origin story because they thought that destroying a planet full of people was horrible. We can't show that. We can't show a planet full of people blowing up. And somebody came up with the response, but they're aliens. It's like, oh, okay.
Wow. That's Hollywood for you. Yeah. So moving on then. So, we finally get to the script. So, you've gone through, as you say, writing a pitch outline, which is just the idea. What are the key things to think about when you're actually going to write a script?
Okay, so you'll see a lot of action lines here. Writing a script for animation is slightly different than writing a script for a live action show in that we also serve a little bit as directors on the page. So we're moving the camera around a lot of the time and trying to let the storyboard artists who are going to get this document know what to draw. And the more specific we can be on the page, the more helpful it is to them. So if you write something like They Fight, you're kind of reviled because you're asking somebody to sit down, an artist to sit down, draw, and imagine the whole thing. And our boss, Jeff Klein, really pushed for this kind of script with all these details, which makes them pretty long, about 32 pages. I will also say that now Frankie has her actual name in this script, and the SE means story editor, and that's me, so Brian wrote it, I story edited this one. What else?
I started out in features, So when I moved into animation about halfway through my career, it wasn't much of a shift. As I said, I think writing is writing, storytelling is storytelling. And the formatting is a bit different, as Nicole pointed out. There's a lot called out. And I think it's different from production to production because some productions have a lot of time and money. And the board artists will come up with things. But usually there's neither of those things, time or money. So the board artists need a lot of help. They want to know what am I supposed to draw? So that's why we kind of try to go into as much detail as possible. You're not supposed to do that when you're writing features, which my rule for writing is anything, these action lines, the paragraphs, is what you're describing what's on the screen, what you're watching. Anything else is superfluous and extraneous and gets in the way.
I see a typo, this is killing me.
Oh my God, it's going to kill you, is it? Am I going to have to retype this now?
I'll be right back, guys.
But that's what you should be writing. What are we looking at on the screen? Nothing about what anybody's thinking, nothing about what anybody's feeling, nothing about your opinions about anything, just what's on the screen. So, the more, like Nicole said, the more detail you can, the better. Although sometimes board artists push back. And it's like, well, I want to contribute to this, and that's great. That's what you want from a board artist. You want to plus it without changing it, without thinking they've come up with something better, which maybe they do. And I'm happy to see that, but plussing is the great thing. It's wonderful when you're actually collaborating with the board artists and you bounce ideas off of each other. That's the best. That's when it's fun to work in animation.
Yeah, animation is a really collaborative medium, and so yeah, you can actually keep boosting something at each level as each person goes to it if you guys are kind of in lockstep with what you want to create. This as economically as possible in the parenthetical here in the fourth action paragraph down. That's something about budget right there. Oh my God, how many townsfolk are they? What does preparing mean?
We always try to reuse the incidentals as much as possible, which is why during the 4 years of Rescue Bots, some of the incidentals kind of became day players.
Yeah, we got our head canons.
Yeah. We all had our head canons about that. Yeah. But this is kind of to assuage the storyboard artists and the animation studio that we can't create any more incidental characters. We're going to have to either change the color of their clothes or something. But that's always if you watch the 4 years of Rescue Bots, you see the same townsfolk.
But it's a small island.
It's a small island, so it works. Yeah.
But do you love that when you see a CG show and there's like 2 townsfolk? Oh, on Transformers Prime we had a limited amount of sets, and so we were trying to figure out what the name of the show was going to be, and there was a lot of talk about that, and we were joking that it should be Transformers Canyons.
There was a lot of space, yes,
yeah.
in Transformers Prime. So, you mentioned that these scripts would normally end up being around 32 pages?
Yeah, I brought the pilot here.
22, that's pretty long.
It is.
We also go by
line
count, the counting of the dialogue lines.
Yeah.
Usually around 110 per 11 minute and 220 for 22 minutes.
Yeah.
A good rule of thumb. It's very hard to do. But
so this one's 33 pages and 210 lines.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. So, but I think that some of the length is because we're calling out so many things.
Yeah, it's usually the page count is. We always have to try to tell people go by the line count, the dialogue count, not by the page count, because that's the true measure of how long it is. I will say too, though, that before we go into doing something with this too, as Nicole mentioned the pilot. She wrote the best pilot ever for this show.
This is why I brought him with me to the convention, guys.
And I think my name's on it too, but I don't remember doing anything. I think you wrote it, didn't you?
You storyed it.
I storyed it. No, I was the...
But you,
Did I?
for that one you did, because we developed it together with Jeff Klein.
Oh, that's right, yeah, we created Chef Klein. But yeah, Nicole's very good at world creating, and that's what I think was so helpful on the show, that we just dove in. And it wasn't, and I do remember a little of it, Jeff contributed a lot. Jeff contributed a whole lot. Jeff Klein is so good. He executive produced Transformers Prime, Rescue Bots, G.I. Joe. He got the Hub their Emmy on their first year on the air, which is just remarkable for a network to win an Emmy for a show in the first year on the air. And so they thanked him by firing him after season 1, and then we kind of took over. So it wasn't really fired. He stepped back because they wanted to. It was so successful they wanted to cut the budget. So in order to do that, he stepped down so that they could spend the money that his salary would go to on the show as such, so which was good of him. But anyway, the world creation, I think, was just fantastic. We spent a lot of time on that, so that by the time we sat down to write the pilot, the world was formed, and it was excellent.
Okay, so moving on then.
So here's some of the notes.
So yes, now Jeff Klein is famous for his notes. Now I don't know if these are his specific notes or whether they're, but
these are from Network.
Network, okay.
The studio.
Sorry, I think the studio. This is from the hub, and the responses are in caps, and you always know Jeff Klein because he responds in caps and says, usually says, responses are in caps. I'm not yelling at you except when I am. So yeah, so you'll see some of the notes we did get on this. You know, here's the phone booth one, and then this question about the lobsters. Does this have this? It does. This is my favorite standards and practices note ever, maybe. Please ensure that spray on pants is fictitious.
Did we assure them of that?
There was a response, I think it's not on here, but there was something along the lines of like, we'll make it spray on, what was it? It was like spray on t-shirts, otherwise. Should scare you too.
I think they discovered that there are such things as spray on pants.
What a world we live in.
Now, did you try pushing back against this note?
This is Jeff pushing back, and this is Jeff actually kind of agreeable, even though it is all in caps. He can get pretty
Passionate,
yeah. And you have to choose your battles, you know. Some things are worth pushing back on, some things save your powder, keep your powder dry for another day.
But I mean, here's a great, we get this note at 10 to 11 here about why do lobsters target Joe in the phone booth. And yeah, that's why we're doing it. But then Jeff kind of spins it and he's like, oh hey, how about if she's wearing a dress with stars on it? And we can use that so she can further logic and work smarter. So that's like a good pivot to a note, you know?
Yeah.
As much as we complain about notes.
Yeah, you try to find a way to make the note work, and
Exactly.
that was very clever. I remember actually designing that, and that was another thing. Do we have to design a new costume for her because of that? Yes, we do. And every choice kind of informs many other choices down the road.
Right, and I just really fast want to say, like, to that point, sometimes you'll watch something and you'll be like, why did they do that? That's so dumb, that's lazy writing. There's usually a note behind it. That's all I will say.
It's very funny. Yeah, we can watch shows now and go, that was a note. You know, just because why would they be saying this otherwise? And not just on animated shows, but like on, you know, TV shows, movies, everything.
And so these notes can come from the studio?
This S&P was connected with the hub, that was the network. These were from Hasbro Studios at the time. So they're probably from like Bogle or Eliza or something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, really. But then we also, so we're getting them from those two entities, and then from Brand as well. Rhode Island Hasbro as opposed to Los Angeles Hasbro.
Okay.
Which is now E1, is it? And where are they located? Where's it?
They're still at the Hasbro in Burbank.
Oh, they are.
But I think they have New York offices too.
They were usually
It's been the pandemic,
regarding the toyetic parts of the show. Can we push this, can we push that, or usually they were more pragmatic than creative.
So are these all coming in at the same time, or there are all these? This is a rolling set of notes. So you're revising constantly then these scripts.
Yeah, I mean, premise gets notes, outline gets notes, first draft of script, second draft of script, usually a polish to revision gets notes as well. Then when we go through and do the next step, animatic, and we cut together the storyboards, we're still getting notes there. So sometimes you have to do some different writing there as well to make things more clear, punch up the joke, things like that.
Oh, that reminds me of something right in a minute. But it depends too on the time. I mean, usually the premise, you don't do another draft of. Sometimes if they really hate an outline, they're going to do a second draft of an outline. Usually you can talk them into going straight to script. We'll address those notes as script.
Sometimes they kill it.
Sometimes they kill it, which doesn't happen. It didn't happen too much on restaurants. But so the schedule actually informs a lot of those decisions too sometimes.
Oh, I have another crazy budget story. So when they made these toys, they didn't realize that preschool toys have to have a specific grade of plastic that costs slightly more than other toys. And so that actually affected our budget because it was like, it cost more to make the toys. We didn't anticipate that. And also, color of toy increases budget. And so with Quick Shadow, when she came along, you know, we had her kind of this pearlescent white, And that was a really big decision because, yeah, she'll stand out on the color palette that we've established, but that's a more expensive type of toy to make. So these are things, you don't necessarily think about when you're sitting down and writing something. So, always an exciting thing.
Okay, so we've had the notes then, and then...
This is, it's a revised network draft. So, if you were able to scroll through this, you'd see that it's much the same as the previous script, but now it should be the right length, and we've got all the notes incorporated, and we're ready to record. Yeah, but take my word for it. Sorry.
So, and then, it's done. There's a script, as you say, goes to recording studio.
We take the rest of the day off.
And that's it! Yeah! So all you've got to do is dodge the notes, come up with a good idea, refine the good idea, and then write an entire script. Sounds easy.
Right, 26 of them. All at the same time.
Well, so yeah, as a series producer, you're getting scripts in from writers all over the place, pitches from writers.
Generally, when all shows are different. Originally, on the first seasons of Rescue Out, we had 2 story editors, the supervising producer, supervising director, Frank Moliere. It was fantastic. What Nicole did for the text of the show, Frank did for the visuals of the show, he's so good.
He hand animated all of the transformations
Right, yeah,
at his desk one
we
day.
decided early on, and this is kind of like, I just love that there's so many Transformers fans. It's like, what is there about this franchise that speaks to so many people? And for me, my background was in features, as I said, and a lot of family stuff. I worked on the first Mighty Ducks film, the feature film. I worked on a lot of stuff at Disney, and through that feature work at Disney, I moved into Winnie the Pooh, and Jeff and I worked on that show, a show I pitched to Disney Junior. And he picked, I think he wanted me on the show, even though I was not a big Transformers fan, because I had the preschool experience, and this show was a younger show. So I feel like I brought that to it. You brought your knowledge of everything.
Right, and Greg Johnson wrote on Beast Wars.
Greg Johnson had written before. And what was my point again? I don't know. I start talking, and I just, if I get to your point, let me know.
So, I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this or not, and I don't even know if you'll remember it.
Okay.
But you mentioned there about sometimes you read a script and you have to kill it. On a show like Rescue Bots, which is a family show, and it's aimed at a younger demographic, can you think of a time and a reason why you had to kill something? Specifically not killing somebody in Rescue Bots, obviously, but...
I can remember the Tigger and Pooh script that got killed.
Yeah.
That's where we met on that show. And it was a show about a baseball glove. I can't remember what the plot was.
Kids don't know what baseball gloves are.
The note was, kids don't know what baseball gloves are. It won't be important to a 6-year-old.
I made us sad.
And that was sad. And we tried, but they just killed it.
On Rescue Bots, though, we were able, so we kind of threw ourselves on the train tracks a lot. If something wasn't working and we got a script that wasn't working from a writer, we'd do a page 1 rewrite on that and then submit that script. So I do remember there have been times that I've had to throw out a lot of what I got. Sometimes I'll retain like a line. So that's kind of preventing that on that show.
And that was my point. I was going to get to freelancers.
Oh.
Because on Rescue Bots we didn't have staff writers, but we used a lot of freelancers. And freelancers will come and pitch ideas for stories, and some of them we use, but usually they're not familiar enough with the show to be able to say, oh, we already did that, and we're thinking of that, we have a similar story. Sometimes they have a story, but usually we assign them a premise or a story.
Yeah, so on Rescue Bots, it would be Greg and Brian and I in a room, and we'd be pitching ideas to each other and kind of getting a handful of premises that we could then assign to a writer. So, we would come up with like, here's Dr. Morocco, here's what we want to do with him, and then, okay, we've got these premises, let's give them to writers. Yeah. And sorry.
Oh, no, go on.
I was going to say that lets kind of like the core creative control any arcs you're doing in the show and prepare for any big revelations instead of just having freelancers pitch and doing one-offs. I think on a show that doesn't have a lot of mythology, it's a lot easier to just be like, okay, what's the story of the day?
It's interesting. Things have changed a little bit because of the pandemic for one reason, but also there was a movement sort of started 5, 6, 7 years ago where, to me, I've always written alone in a room. So working with other people, coming up with ideas, that's normal, but a lot of the networks, a lot of the studios now want to have what they call punch-up rooms, where after a script is finished, like the one you just saw, let's hire some outside comedians or comic writers to come in and punch up the script, and I hate that.
It's not insulting at all.
Yeah, not insulting at all. We thought it was kind of funny to begin with. So, and I think it's been shown. I think there was a lot of animation producers and studios wanting to feel like they were doing sitcoms. It's kind of more of a sitcom model. So, and I think a lot of the comedy cartoon shows that works great with them. For something like this, I don't think it works as well. But it's become a little more common in the last several years. Would you say?
Yeah, or you'll have a room that gang writes, and they'll put it up like we had it here, and then everybody will be here pitching things, and someone's keeping track and changing the lines as they go. So that's also another way. I have not had that experience, but I do know a lot of people who write that way. Yeah.
I always tend to think that one writer giving their expression is, you can tell in a script. You can always tell that was written by more than one person, or that was written by a committee. Sometimes you see a show somewhere and feel like it was written by a committee, and it's flat. So one person, one script.
Okay, what we're going to do is Katrina, who is hanging around at the back, is going to go grab a microphone, and if you've got any questions, stick your hands
If
up.
you'd like to sing a duet.
Okay.
If we're here to
Ladies and
hear.
gentlemen, Mr.
Or
Jim.
can I start, Jim?
Jim, sorry, sir.
Jim, I want to come back to you because I think we've got time at the end.
Hi there. What advice what careers advice would you give to aspiring writers who want to work on Transformers one day? Would you recommend, okay, well, try working on these kind of shows because Hasbro might want someone who's done that, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, so if you're going to break in, one of the kind of rules of thumb is don't write the thing that you want to work on, because it's kind of like going to someone saying, I know your child better than you do, which you may, but one of the things that we're told is you want to write a comp. So if you were going to write a spec for a television show similar to Transformers, you'd find maybe like another 22 action adventure, or depending on which kind of area you like. You could write a live action spec, you could write an animation spec. Generally, and when I say spec, I mean speculative script. You've written it free. It's a script that you're showing to people like a calling card. This is my style.
And is it an original idea, or is it?
So you can either do an original idea, which is like your own pilot, for instance, or you could do a spec script for a show that exists. This is an episode that could have happened. It was the last episode. Here you go.
But not for the show you're auditioning for.
Exactly. Which, yeah, that's kind of just the basic word of thumb. Or word of thumb. I've just coined a phrase. But the other thing is that this is going to sound so dumb, but the most important advice I can give to people who want to write is to finish it. So J. Michael Straczynski told me this when I was getting started, and I have never forgotten it, because he looked at me. I was at Comic-Con, and he looked out in the audience, and he goes, if you want to succeed, you have to finish it. And I went like this, and he saw me, and he's like, I see you, finish it.
You had to.
Yes, sir.
Waking up in the middle of the night, still terrified of J. Michael Straczynski.
All right.
So Nicole, you mentioned that the more expensive grade of plastic impacted your budget, but you didn't say how. Was more expensive toys something that warranted a more expensive show, or were you expected to make up a shortfall?
So yeah, I believe it was the shortfall was like, and so since we didn't plan for that, I can't remember if it came out of marketing or what it was, but there were ripple effects from that for our show.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm back here.
Hello, there we go.
Hey.
Sorry, I've been thinking this question over for the last 10 minutes and my phrasing might be very, very strange. So you spoke earlier about how specifically the dialogue in a script is kind of the best indicator of the runtime. And typically an episode of animation is 22 minutes, something like that. So what happens if you get your script gets to a long kind of development and you're, say, a couple of minutes short of that runtime? Is that something that is mostly kind of tackled by the writing department? Is that collaborating with animation and writing, or does that happen so infrequently that it's just not an issue?
I would say for me, so infrequently. I'm a massive overwriter, and I have to cut fun scenes that are just, you look at it and you're like, this is a character scene, and it really, you don't need it for the plot, so it goes. I can't think of any time we've come in short. Can you?
I think there was one time that we came in short, and maybe it wasn't even Rescue Bots, but I remember because of the notes that we got, we had to cut stuff, and we were short. So I can't remember what happened at that point.
We had this kind of like backup strategy on Rescue Bots, which I'd love to do on any show I could, which is we had a 30-second theme song and we had a 45-second theme song. And so if you were going a little over, it definitely the 30-minute.
I don't think we used that 45-second one in the last 3 seasons at all. We were always right up against it.
But I would say that if we were feeling short, that would be a place where you'd go in, because at that point you really can't be designing anything else, and so it'd have to be mostly dialogue ads. And so I think you probably would just add a little bit more quipping throughout, because you really can't add to an action sequence at that point.
I've always wanted as a challenge to write an episode using only existing animation. To just because after 104 episodes, you've pretty much done every scene possible, every rescue possible. And so I think we probably had enough to do that. It would take a lot of work, but it might be kind of fun just to,
Got an idea for you. Time machine Funimation. Funimation Studios.
Oh, yeah.
Notorious for just
Yeah,
recycling.
exactly. Yeah, that's true. So it has been done. So.
Yeah.
I'd like to do it slightly better, though.
Oh, it's me again. Okay. I do recognize that guy from, I saw his YouTube channel as well, but before first, I'm just going to talk about my question. This is nothing to do with Rescue Bots, but this is mostly to do of you for the new Transformers show coming out for Paramount Plus from Nickelodeon, obviously. This is nothing like a spoiler, I'm not mentioning anything spoiler-related, but what's the story of Lethal One and Optimus Prime's Autobot logo? Because they had the Autobot logo, but it has like this weird circle, what the heck is going on the Autobot logo? But movie has the regular Autobot logo, but what's the story on it? Is it like a rank thing, or something like that?
Well, I would say it's very perceptive of you to pick up on that, and also stay tuned.
Yes, I suppose we probably shouldn't mention this, shouldn't we? The show's not out yet, and there are a lot of legal contracts and things like that. So, yeah, in regards to the new show, as you say, everything will be explained in time.
Can you talk about data?
Oh, okay, so this is EarthSpark related. I'll give you this. To your point about getting started, so the person who pitched EarthSpark is Dale Malinowski, and he actually started out as an assistant at Nickelodeon. And if you're in LA, that's also a great way to kind of move up the ranks to be a writer, starting out as a writer's assistant or development executive's assistant, because you see everything and you read everything. And so that's a great way to just kind of osmose what's getting picked up, what's getting sold, what works, what's getting notes. So that's something I highly recommend, and also reading scripts that exist out there. We can talk more later. But anyway, Dale got the chance to pitch. It was one of those big things where, E1 brought in a bunch of people to have their takes on what this new show could be, and they went with Dale's vision. And Dale had only just been staffed as a staff writer for 1 year. It was really new. But because he was ready to go, he'd been studying for so long, then they're like, okay, here you go, you're the co-EP, and we're making your show. So it's just about, he had so many different spec scripts that he could show off and be ready to go, and that's also the other advice, I think, that when someone knocks on that door, it's be ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go over there.
When he was a bit younger, my nephew was terrified of Dr. Morocco, which is a bit of a push, but he had a very low fear threshold. So how far do you push the sort of evil or villainy or threat on a show like Rescue Bots? And are there fixed limits or things that you weren't able to do?
Yeah.
The feeling was usually not danger, but jeopardy. And Dr. Morocco, I think, was just a little not threatening enough to be. I'm sure he scared some kids, but it's a fine line for that, especially for that age group. But it's more about his diabolicalness that is pure evil, I think. So as long as you stress kind of what he, the technology, how he addresses, how he manipulates technology, he's not killing people. He's trying to just take over. But as long as we stop on that, Tim Curry, my God, how about Tim Curry? Unfortunately, he could not. He had to be recast after his stroke. We had to recast him, which just broke our hearts. But
He was amazing.
he was just amazing.
Apologies for scaring the little ones. We have gotten this note back from some parents on some other. I haven't heard Morocco being the scary thing before, but I'm trying to remember which one scared kids. I know it was a Greg Johnson script because he was always kind of pushing that.
The phone one, the creepy telephone one, where they became slaves over the telephone. That was really creepy.
Pretty creepy. So yeah, it was another kind of rule of thumb for preschool, and not so much in this bridge audience, but in preschool, a lot of times they'll say, if you have a villain, the villain can't want to get the protagonist. They can do something to try to, like you were saying, Jeopardy, they can do something to try to foil the protagonist, but they should never specifically want to kill, harm, maim, other words for that, the protagonist.
Yeah, the heroes are trying to stop them from accomplishing something, not do away with them.
Yeah, we've got a question down here. I don't know where.
Some questions are great.
Hey guys, you mentioned at the beginning that sometimes a studio will approach you and sometimes you approach the studio. Do you have a dream project, either in Transformers or in general, that you would love to do if somebody would let you?
My ship has sailed a little bit because Jurassic Park, the original, is my favorite movie of all time. So the fact that I didn't get to work on Camp Cretaceous breaks me a little bit. So yeah. Basically, my thing is, I love dinosaurs, I love werewolves. If you guys have seen Rescue Bots, you probably know this. And I love griffins. And so whenever I can work those things into one of my projects, I'm happy. But if there's an IP specifically out there, I feel like I've been so lucky to write in the ones I love. So Star Wars, Transformers, Young Justice, like, that's all amazing. But the other thing with that is, it's a real burden in a sense. I mean, there's an onus on you to do right by these characters and to do right by the fans. And that can be a little daunting sometimes, because you want to make sure that you are supporting who these characters are, that you're true to the characters, and yet you're still putting new, good stuff that's interesting into that world. I think that's probably the hardest challenge of legacy properties.
Yeah, we both worked a lot in legacy properties, and we kind of, I at least, and I know you too, try to see ourselves as kind of guardians of the property too. We don't want to be the people who mess up the IP, for Winnie the Pooh and for this and for I've worked with the Muppets. I've worked, it's very, I love it. I mean, I feel so honored to be able to work on those things. And you don't want to be the one to mess it up.
Yeah, Dave Filoni said a really great thing when we were on Rebels, and it's like, we have Star Wars that we love and that we think about, and that there's lines that we love to repeat. And he's like, and that's great for you as a fan and for you as a person, but right now you need to take how you felt at that moment and make that feeling real in a different way for someone else. And so it's in that style of, with that homage. I think I totally went off base from your question, but...
Right, okay, I'm afraid unfortunately we've run out of time. I am sorry, but don't worry, Nicole O'Brien will be back tomorrow to talk about Rescue Bots and back on Sunday to talk about all sorts of the career. However, I think this would be a good way to end, if you're alright with it, but you have no idea what I'm about to say, so get ready. We've been talking a lot about notes, and it's interesting that notes can come from anywhere. You told me last night about a note that came while you were working on Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to just briefly tell people where that note came from?
I kind of stunned everyone last night when I told that story. I pitched and developed a show for Disney Junior in 2005 called My Friends Tigger and Pooh, because they wanted a new Winnie the Pooh show for Disney Junior. And having written for Winnie the Pooh before that, several features and a couple of specials, I did not know what to do with Christopher Robin. He's a very difficult character to write for because he's, it's kind of his story. These people are all in his head. And Disney never knew what to do with him. Sometimes he was kind of like the Christopher Robin of the books, sometimes he was an Americanized version, sometimes he was just kind of a little twerp. And he was just kind of dull. I just felt he was kind of dull. So my pitch, the reason they made the show is that I made Christopher Robin a young American girl, a 6-year-old girl named Darby. And because what inspired that was after years of working in Pooh, I would always meet these kids' premieres and stuff, and they would always say, Winnie the Pooh is my friend. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to have like that child as the main character? Somebody who considers Winnie the Pooh their friend. They just go to the woods and play with him. But anyway, it got announced, this is going to be the show, and we get a call from Disney Junior UK in Burbank, that we get the call. And apparently the Queen's secretary, the Queen of England, her secretary has called Disney Junior UK to say that the Queen is not amused by this. Could we see to it to put Christopher Robin back in the show? And by this time we were like, halfway through the first season. And it was just, no, we can't. But we agreed to do like a couple of guest spots where
You don't say no to the Queen. You just
So that was kind of the highest ranking note I ever received.
So there we go. On that, ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our guests.